and thank you for joining us on Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. According to the Pew Research Center, Vermont is tied with Maine as the 48th most religious state in the U.S. Rounding out the list are Massachusetts and New Hampshire, tied for 50th. And of the 6 New England states, Rhode Island, a state founded on religious freedom, ranks the highest in the poll at 35, and Connecticut comes in at 47. Why does the northeastern part of the United States display such a lack of religious belief? Or does it? Religion is Not Done With You, or The Hidden Power of Religion on Race, Maps, Bodies, and Law, was recently published by Beacon Press. It's co-authored by Megan Goodwin and Ilyse Morgenstein-Fuerst. Many of the ideas and topics in the book were first discussed in the podcast Keeping It 101, a Killjoy's introduction to religion. And Ilyse Morgenstein-Fuerst joins me in the studio today. When she's not writing books or recording podcasts, she's an associate professor of religion and the director of the Humanities Center at the University of Vermont. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
We're happy to have you. And let's start with a question we don't always ask our Across the Fence guests.
Okay.
Do you believe in God?
I do. I'm a practicing Jewish woman. I have been my whole life. But the question of whether or not I believe in God is one that comes up in my line of work all the time. And I usually answer it with a lot more caginess, like, does that matter? Can I think about religious people without myself having that belief?
Sure. And when we're talking about the holiday season now, we're recording this in December, and so when you look ahead at all of the kind of December holidays, you have solstice, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa. Do you think grouping all these together in the holiday season kind of diminishes the religiousness of it all?
No, I don't. I think that an eye to or a hat tip toward plurality makes a lot of sense. We live in a multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-religious nation. But whether this is the only holiday season on an American's calendar, absolutely not, right? Like, there are times in spring where we have Sikh, Muslim, Jewish, and Christian holidays all coalescing right around that Easter and Passover time. We've got all of the Jewish holidays of the fall that often overlap with Jain, Buddhist, and sometimes Baha'i holidays. So there are many holiday seasons, and I don't think calling it that makes it less religious for any one of those participants.
Sure. And what's your take on why the Northeast happens to be a little more secular?
There's a lot of reasons for that. The first of them is that how we measure religiosity is actually about church attendance or synagogue attendance or mosque attendance. It's not measuring what we hold true or what we believe in. And so I think we've seen a turn in places that have aging populations, where we see a cliff of population in New England, and so we see a lot of things diminishing in terms of attendance. But I think we don't do a good job of counting all the folks you see on Mount Mansfield who are there to like experience and feel connected. That feeling is often a religious feeling, but we don't have a way of naming it because it doesn't line up neatly with, I went to this Baptist church.
So do you think there's kind of going to be a change at some point in New England where either more people are going to church, or we just kind of rethink how we consider religion?
I think it's a both and. I think we might start to see, we do see in minoritized religious communities a pretty standard and steady attendance. So we see synagogue attendance, mosque attendance at a steady level. We see a leaving of churches. And so if we decenter Christianity, we actually see a really different pattern of religiosity in New England and beyond. So I think we might see more attendance, and I think we also might find different ways to define what it means to be religious. How do we count religious people is a research question. And
sure.
Therefore, I'm interested in it.
All right. And you kind of mentioned like seeing a different trend if we kind of reframe how we see Christianity. Is there any indicator of where that trend is pointing, or is that something that we're just trying to learn more about?
I think we're really just trying to learn more about it. In my own scholarship, I look to decenter Christianity, not just because I'm a scholar of Islam in South Asia and a Jewish woman, but also because we so often in America say religion when we mean Christianity, and universalizing from one religious group just doesn't make sense given our population or the diversity of our country.
All right, and let's talk a little bit more about kind of the role religion plays. You say in your book, even if you're an atheist or non-religious, too bad. Like, religion has a really big impact on you. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the title of the book is provocative on purpose. Religion is Not Done With You is meant to feel a little bit jarring, because I think we often imagine religion to be a personal choice. I choose to believe in God. I choose to go to synagogue. I choose to teach my children in this way. But the reality is that religion and religious principles show up in our laws, they show up in our healthcare system, they show up in our educational systems. And so regardless of what you choose to do, whether that's atheism or a really hardcore fundamentalist religiosity, religion is still part of our systems. And so ignoring it doesn't make any sense, but also pretending it like doesn't affect you is also a little bit short-sighted.
Sure. We're actually about to play a clip from your podcast as well. I know we're talking about your book, but you're a woman of many talents. And the podcast, of course, is Keeping It 101, a Killjoy's Introduction to Religion. And you kind of talk about how humans reckon with time and how that's based on some religious belief. What do you mean by that?
Well, our calendar is Jesus plus one. It is the year of someone else's Lord, 2024. And so in its conception, the Gregorian calendar is meant to be a unifying calendar for Christian denominations. And then the world picks it up and runs with it because of Christian imperialism in the 18th and 19th century. But we can't escape how, like, Christmas is a federal holiday. It is the only religious holiday that is a federal holiday. So we can't ignore it. And thinking about time as structured by religion is a provocative way to get our readers and our listeners to think more critically about a topic that is often made invisible.
And this is on the 5th season of your podcast, and you and your podcast partner, Megan Goodwin, who we mentioned in the beginning, try and kind of right some of the wrongs and make corrections about religious topics. So let's hear a clip from the episode called Incorrect Hijab.
This is not a fit that you put on that says, don't look at me, I want to be invisible, I want to look like a monk. These are garments that the wearer says, I look cute as hell, and also my look lines up with my moral and religious and or cultural values and norms. Like, I am both right with God and I am right. Like, this is correct. So it can be how I have adorned myself, how I've celebrated my temple, also helps me keep my own piety, my own commitments at the forefront of my brain. But not always. That's it. That's pious fashion. It's sartorial choices that people are making with their religious and their cultural and their personal values and commitments in mind. And, like, let's be real, when we're talking about this stuff, we are often talking about women and femmes because gender bias and misogyny locates these conversations on the bodies of women and femmes.
And if you're just joining us, we're talking with Ilyse Morgenstein-Fuerst, the co-author of a new book, Religion is Not Done With You, or The Hidden Power of Religion on Race, Maps, Bodies, and Law. And your research centers a lot around Islam and Muslim in South Asia, kind of the intersection of imperialism and religion, talking about race and belonging. So how did you get interested in that?
Well, I was a college freshman, not to date myself, but I was a college freshman on 9/11, and I happened to be taking a class with Professor Omid Safi, who's a really internationally famous Islamic studies scholar. And my own sense of social justice and what I wanted to be when I grew up, and this really cataclysmic, world-changing event meant I think I need to know more about Muslims. I'm watching Islamophobia unfold in real time. What do I want to do about it? And then I was blessed to go on a study abroad program to South Asia, and I figured that a lot of the questions I was asking about politics, about race, about religion in public spaces were really fascinating in that particular locale. So that is kind of how a Jewish girl from New Jersey ends up studying South Asia and Islam. But I think a lot of the ideas about race, religion, imperialism, power, and practice are portable. So what I ask in India, I would answer differently in the States, but I would have the same questions.
Sure. And there's an old saying that there are two things that you don't mention maybe in polite conversation, and that's politics and religion.
Yeah.
But obviously both your book and your podcast dive into religion a good amount, and I'm sure politics to a certain extent. So where do you think, is there a line of what's appropriate to talk about?
No, I don't. I actually think not talking about things makes it possible to hide oppression, abuse, discrimination more readily. And I think in a moment where we see an unprecedented rise in anti-religious hate crimes across the boards, we see anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-Sikhism, all of this is on an unprecedented rise. And I think if we don't talk about it, we create fertile ground for injustice to flourish. And I don't know. Those are the weeds I want to pull out of my garden. I don't want them there, but we got to name them so that we can get rid of them.
Sure. We're actually going to listen to another clip from your podcast. It's from an episode about the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid, which your co-host Megan Goodwin has some pretty strong feelings about. And when the phrase is used kind of out of context or in jokes, and this is a bit of a warning for our viewers, suicide and child murder are discussed in this clip. It's a little bit heavier. And we also had to bleep Megan for saying something that we can't say here on TV. Let's take a listen.
I'm not mad at jokes. I'm not. But I am mad both about people punching down and about people insisting it's their right to punch down in this particular case, because obviously the folks who died at Jonestown were stupid, brainwashed sheeple who brought their deaths on themselves by being too dumb to not commit suicide when a mentally ill wannabe Father Divine with cheap sunglasses and a ham radio told them to off themselves and their kids. First, and least importantly, it wasn't fucking Kool-Aid. It was cyanide. It wasn't.
I'm sorry, I already lost. Okay.
It was cyanide-laced Flavor Aid. This is nitpicking, but I guess if you're going to make light of the tragic murder of hundreds of people who were just trying to make the world a better place, maybe check your lipstick first. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, you should know if you're having a slush puppy or an icy.
You should.
The details matter in a joke. A good joke has a good detail.
Exactly. So this isn't even a good joke.
And we're talking about religion, podcasting, and books with UVM's Associate Professor of Religion and the Director of the Humanities Center at the University of Vermont, Ilyse Morgenstein-Fuerst. And we're almost out of time, but as we heard there, Megan is very passionate about the topic, and as kind of an academic, what's your idea to approach things kind of non-passionately like that?
I don't. I think that we should have passion and opinion. I think that neutrality serves the powers that be, and I think, frankly, Megan and I both work on hate crimes, abuse, the things you're not supposed to talk about and the things that bum everybody out. How could we not feel passionately? And to be dispassionate in that setting is to say, yeah, like murder's fine, or these terrible things in the world I don't have an opinion on. And so I think being fact-driven means that we can be objective in how we are thinking about topics,
Sure.
But that doesn't take away the anger and pain and harm that I feel when I talk about them. So I like passion, but I also like facts.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. And the book is Religion is Not Done With You by Megan Goodwin and Ilyse Morgenstein-Fuerst. It's available now wherever you get your books. And here on Across the Fence, we always encourage you to stop at your local library. And I want to thank the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX who make our program possible. I'm Jolie Whitney. This is Across the Fence. Have a good one.